Hey, everybody, welcome to It Tastes Different Gaming. What's on the menu today for dessert? Raspberry zingers and game preservations. Today, we're going to talk about game preservations. Buying games, classic games, new games, old games, going digital, going in your pocket, going in your case, going home with you. Nick, you are the game preservation guru in this group. You have definitely more than the entirety of us combined 5 times over. What is your thoughts on game preservations, and what do you do to keep it preserved?
Put it in a can. I love older games, so I try to keep them. I like to keep game preservation. I have a lot of older games: Nintendo, Genesis, Dreamcast. I mean, you name it, I probably own it. As far as an old game, right now, not the whole collection, of course. I mean, eventually, one day when I'm old and gray, I might have a whole collection of something. But I try to collect as much as I can, and it's really partially game preservation and partially because I want to play these games, right? I might not get to them right away, but these are games that I enjoy and love, and some games I never played before. So I like game preservation for that fact. There's a lot of games that come out every single year. Some games come out sometimes 5 or 6 games will come out a day, right? And there's a lot of games that I want to play, and the problem is I miss out on those games. And being able to have that game preservation where either I go out and purchase one, or somebody like Microsoft or Sony or Nintendo make them available through some sort of offering, right? Or in Steam or something like that. Xbox has, Game Pass, and they have the Xbox backwards compatibility, which they haven't started up again. Hopefully they do. They kind of ended it a couple years ago, and it was supposed to start up again. I think COVID kind of maybe put a little damper on that, but hopefully, we got Xbox Design Lab coming back. So hopefully game preservation or their backwards compatibility will come back, and then we can get some more regular Xbox games and 360 games on the backwards compat list that we can play again. And that's great, because there's a lot of games on there that I never got to play that I really wanted to. So hopefully Sony does that same thing. They do have PlayStation Now, which they do have some games on there, but they don't. I mean, they have the only thing with PlayStation Now is they have a lot of the heavy hitters, which Xbox did the same thing too. But Xbox did release some that I never played before. Asura's Wrath is one of them, and we picked that one up, Shane, and I still haven't played it, but I definitely want to, because that was one back on the 360 I really want to play and never got to it. So that game, yeah. All right. I do want to play it. So there's a lot of old games that I pick up, and I just picked up 2 today, which I played both of those, but we did go to a retro game store, and I picked up a couple of classics, Dracula's Curse 3 and Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, which I did play when I was younger, but I love those games, so I'll play through them again. But I love seeing older games, and I'm like, I remember this one, and I really want to play it. So I try to buy those old games and kind of look into systems that preserve those, so where we can play them again, because they're easy to miss, right? Games come and go so quickly that it's easy to miss some of the great ones, or some oddball game that you really might like that you never got to experience. So, I don't care if it has the greatest graphics or anything. If it's a good game, it's a good game. That's all that comes down to it. So I like game preservation. I like to be able to go back and play those games. And the more I can collect and have, and the more opportunities that Xbox or maybe Sony or Nintendo can do with preserving those classic games, I think it's better, because everyone likes old movies, right? Why not old video games? So yeah. I mean, that's my take on it. Russ, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think Nick is as much as it is a game preservation, he's also a collector. So, maybe they go hand in hand. I'm not really sure. I mean, you guys can argue that whether or not it's game preservation versus collection, but also I think when I think of game preservation, a couple of things I think of like original source codes, original sourcing, emulators, stuff like that. They really, obviously, because of the way certain games were made, especially during certain periods, they may not be able to pull that code out the right way. So you might miss a functionality within the game that you had previously. So emulators are okay, but that's really appreciative, that there at least people are trying to get those games out there. I think some of my favorite stuff that I have when it comes to game preservation is fan stuff. Black Mesa is one of the games where that's a great game where they took Half-Life and a bunch of fans kind of brought it back to life, kind of brought it back to a newer, cleaner version. Game preservation to me is just that. It's like collecting. It's like keeping an old album. It's like, you have an old vinyl album that maybe your parents gave you or that you bought, like an original Nirvana Nevermind, which I can't believe we're that old now to say that was that long ago, but that's a perfect thing. That's a perfect example of keeping these games fresh. That's really what I think of as game preservation. I don't have the consoles everybody else has, so I really have to rely on like iOS versions or something like that, or something on that I can download as an emulator, or even a digital copy of some of these games. And we've had some of the Perfect Darks, some stuff like that we've been able to find on Xbox. That's really been great. They're like Baseball Stars 2, for example. That's probably something that I'm using an emulator, but I'm still missing something because it's different. It's still a little bit different because maybe they're using the arcade version versus the actual Nintendo, the Super NES, or not the Super NES, but the original NES series had a different version. That those type of things maybe miss out on that. But it's very important that we have those kind of game preservations, because we do have a lot of gamers that are really, really this is what they do. Nick is a perfect example. He's our one in the group. He is our guru of all games. And so it's fun to see him light up when he finds a certain particular game or something like that in a store. But Shane, what about you, man? What you got?
Yeah. So me and Nick went to Game World today, here by my place. He found him some classics that he loves. They have some that I greatly want. I just greatly can't afford. The Legend of Dragoon, I think, was $100 there. It is definitely one that should be cherished. It should be brought back. Caveman Games is one I've been trying to find. I cannot find. It's a Nintendo 64 game. It's Olympics with dinosaurs. I love that game growing up. Absolutely loved it. The ability to keep those old games and keep those old consoles going is it's starting to die down. You have people that are, they'll rebuild an Xbox, an OG Xbox, and rebuild a 64. But I don't know, it's just not the same. And digital's not the same either. I buy a lot of digital for my new consoles. I don't buy them for PS2, PS3. I can get them digitally now, but I try not to, because I would rather have the originals. I own Final Fantasy VIII in every iteration except for on my phone. Because if I had it on my phone, I'll never get off the toilet. So but Nick's shelves that he has with all those games on her, it's like walking into a childhood. It's awesome. There's the National Video Game Museum in San Francisco. They have my wet dream of collections. They have everything. And I would love to be able to have that. I cannot afford to do that, though. Like I said, I would love to have Legend of Dragoon. I would take it out, though. I would play it because I love that game. I can't keep it in a box because I am a gamer. I'm not a collector. I'm a gamer. I want to play those games. But it is nice with the digital, though, that my son's generation can play those games that I enjoyed, like movies that I enjoyed. Goonies, he just watched. He loved it. Spaceballs, he watched. He loved it. And games are the same way. Hopefully he will love those games that I did, but he's only going to be able to play most of them on digital. So we do need to cherish these things. We do need to not sell them for hundreds of thousands of freaking dollars, but we need to, cherish these things just like you would a movie. I mean, Indiana Jones hat would go for $1 billion. I think, I think preservation of a movie is just as important as it should be for a video game. But I am excited to see them bringing new things to digital for the kids these days, but I like my discs. I bought Grand Theft Auto 3 and Demon's Stone a few months ago, and I love it. I love the way they look up there, right next to my Final Fantasy, my Metal Gears, all that stuff. So I'm happy.
I think there's still a level of collection, though, even in it. I mean, I know what you're saying. You like to play them, but at the same time, that that physical copy you love to look at, like you said, like you love to. I think that too is also kind of Nick's thing. Is he loves to see that. Patrick has that with board games. Like he loves all. He likes to see all those things with his board games and stuff. And so I agree with that. I do want to say, like, the one thing that's a little bit like, for me, this particular podcast we're talking about is right up Nick's alley. But for me, like, I miss particular MMOs. Like, everybody knows I love Star Wars Galaxies. It's one of my favorite games, but like, that game, number one, probably wouldn't hold up in a time like now. And then they also have emulators out there, but the emulators can only do so much because all they have is the data from the discs. There were particular upgrades, quality of life things that were added into it that they don't have original source codes for. And like, they're either trying to A, write them, or B, they just don't work. And so, it would be nice to have like a digital world to pull some of those older games like that from. That would be something that I would love. If I could run my own server for Star Wars and have, like, the day before NGE came out, like, if I could have that source code for that patch, I would absolutely love that. That would be something I'd play for the rest of my life. But again, they're not going to do that.
No, they won't. One thing I was thinking about, Russ, while you're talking, was I think the most important thing that I truly enjoy about finding an old game is the box art. The Dino Crisis, for instance, Nick, when we were up at Game World, it was like, man, you see that box art and it brings back all those feels. It's not, I didn't see it on a screen. I didn't see it in a magazine. I saw it physical, and that's a whole different thing when you see it. I mean, I love the way, because I keep two games, my two favorite PS2 games, two favorite PlayStation games, Metal Gear Solid 1 and Final Fantasy 8. I keep those set up in display all times. I love those. They're my favorite things. I spent more hours on those than I can count. The box art on those things are fantastic. When you see box art on those, you just can't get past it. Box art nowadays, the graphics are amazing and they're gorgeous and it's wonderful, but I don't know. I think they lack the imagination and passion that they used to have too. But to me, that's that preservation of the physical is what I truly, truly like. You go to Nick's house and it's, wonderland for video games and those shelves he's got. You don't get that feeling looking at him on a screen, but I'm old. I like, I don't like to read off the computer. I would rather read paper.
Right. It's not the same feeling when you have a digital version, right? I mean, I have the digital version of Legend of Dragoon, which we've talked about and you talked about before, Shane. It's a great RPG. And I have it on my PS3, and that's great, but it's still not the same. I don't look at it on there as the same as I do. But yeah, I mean, in general, yeah, you want to keep this game just like anything else in life. You don't want these things to disappear, even like MMOs, like Russ was saying. You want to keep that original idea, and just like Russ was saying, that original source code of that game, and getting that. I don't know. It almost feels like a digital version or something like that. It's just different than having the physical copy of the game. That's just originally how it was, right?
Isn't it like almost like porting a computer game to a console? I mean, like, you lose things when you port it.
Right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a perfect point, Russ. It's just, I don't know. Some things just don't transition well. I think you're right with the PC to console transition. Digital content of a 30-year-old game doesn't hold up like a 30-year-old disc or a 30-year-old cartridge. I mean, Nick, when you bought your games today, I mean, I saw you just giddy as a schoolgirl, and you weren't going to get that downloading them. You're just not.
Yeah, I played Dracula's Curse 3, and it's just not the same.
Russ, when you started PC playing, I was never a big PC player in my younger days. I was always a console kid. I mean, from Atari on up. When Steam came out, didn't that basically just kill discs for computers? I mean, I remember seeing them all the time at the store at Walmart when I was a kid or something, and be like, "Oh man, I wish I had a computer. I could play this." But I wasn't a PC kid. I didn't have internet till I was in my late 20s, damn near 30. So,
well, I think actually DSL killed hard copies. Once you can start getting download speeds, once you start getting 1 and 5 and 10 meg download speeds, I mean, I think that killed it a little bit. I mean, I think that did play a little bit more into some of that. But just for example, today, I mean, I dropped off Dead to Rights 2. Now, that's not an ancient game. It's like 2005, but it's a pretty old game. And as I was going through those discs, I didn't even tell I didn't even tell Nick this. I found my original copies to Dungeon Siege, Summoner.
I don't
know
Summoner.
If some of y'all remember that game, THQ game, Summoner. I mean, those are 20-year-old games now. I got my original Counter-Strike discs. I found those. What else? Battlefield 1942. Found those original discs. So it was kind of ironic that we're doing this game preservation today, and I found some old discs, and I was like, you know what? What kind of sucks about that is that in that day, everybody had the black CD case that was like this thick, and you had we took everything out of there and we threw away the boxes. Now I'm kind of wishing I would be able to show you that original Dungeon Siege box or something like that, or something interesting like that. So it was cool. I was actually debating on whether or not I was going to try to install Dungeon Siege is probably one of my, I mean, it's probably a top 10 game. I've said my top 5 games, but it's definitely probably a top 10 game. It was like one of the very first, when you say, Shane, you played PC games. That was like the third PC game I ever purchased myself was Dungeon Siege. I mean, I went out and I was like, oh, this is a cool game. There's a lot of copies, and I heard some guy talking about it, so I'll get it. And I played it, and the next thing you know, I lost probably about 70 hours of my life, playing that game. So it's interesting that we're talking about that.
It's such a big difference when you sit and you think about the differences in the exact same game. Basically, Final Fantasy VIII. I look at it over here on my stereo, and then I can go right to my Xbox or my PlayStation or my computer and just pull it right up. I don't have to deal with the disc, but it's not the same. It's not, because when I get to that set area on Final Fantasy VIII, I have to eject the disc, swap it out for disc 2, and I miss that. It was great. Like, oh yeah, disc spaces are larger now, so you don't have to deal with all that. But man, I mean, when you go and buy the box and it's that thick because you got 4 to 6 discs because the game is so big, I love that. I miss those. Granted, I do like the smaller spaces now on my shelves, but I think I wish I could keep my collection a lot larger, but I do love the digital as well. It's hard to say I don't, because the quick access, I can just jump on and play it. Like Russ was saying, he could play it on his iOS. I can play it on my phone right now. I can play it just about anywhere, but it just doesn't have that same feel. And you can never. One thing Final Fantasy has always had through every iteration is beautiful box art. But without the box, it's just not the same.
Yeah, for sure. You know, game preservation is just
Mhm.
trying to, kind of keep that memory alive, and try to keep those games alive and not forget about the games that came before, not forget about these titles. Because it would be easy for these games, and just like movies and books and various other media, to get lost in the pages of history. And trying to keep game preservation. There's a lot of sites out there that are doing that. There's a lot of sites, kind of like what you talked about, Shane, museums and various other things out there, and websites that are trying to keep a collection of this game preservation, and trying to keep a collection of games. And there's one I can't think of right now, but they do, like, they have a lot of donations and various things like that, and they have a whole list of games that they have. And that might have been the museum you were talking about, that they have physical copies of all these games, and they're just there to preserve them, right? They're not there to collect, not necessarily as a collection or anything like that, but to have and what they do too is they don't from my understanding, is they don't just have the physical copy. They also take that copy and digitally transcribe it as well. So they have backups of these to kind of keep it kind of like a museum in a way, right? To keep it back up, you have the preserved copy in the back, and then you have these digital copies or whatever that are out there in front. And just to keep these things preserved, and to remember all these games that came before us and are here now and will be there in the future. So that's the way I look at it. Just to kind of keep a library list, not just a list of names, but a list of actual media that you can go back to and play and experience, and preserving that. Because just like a good book or a good movie, you always want to go back to those things, right? I mean, there's a lot of movies that you probably watched 20 million times, right? And what if if we didn't have some sort of preservation, they could make it to where
Yeah,
a movie's good
absolutely.
for a month and then it goes away forever, right? Or something like that. So having that preservation allows us to experience these things even in the future, and show our future children, grandchildren, or whoever, the things that we used to experience in the past, and the games we used to play, or the movies we used to watch, the books we used to read, or whatever.
Yeah, the medium
So
of
it's
video
it's a very
games
important
has
thing, I think.
grown exponentially since the early '90s, late '80s. National Museum of Modern Art has Pong, has Mario. I think they even have Halo. Because every once in a while you get a game that redefines a genre, creates a new genre that sticks with you forever. And no matter what, it's never going to be the same as the original version. No matter what format you put it in later, if it's not the original format, not the same. Um, Halo reinvented, basically created great console shooters. You used not to be able to do it with except for the keyboard and mouse. Keyboard and mouse is still better, but it's amazing what the Halo did with it. Last of Us Part One, the original, what it did for storytelling was absolutely amazing. And just Mario itself, the nostalgia when you think of Mario is just amazing. And you cannot get that with a digital format. Those physical copies must be cherished. Those box arts must be cherished. And donate to the places like that too.
Well, I think also like the addition into that is the
Mm-hmm.
textile feel of an old NES controller while you're playing Mario. I think all of that, like putting like that whole thing, that whole process of that is what is key to that. Because like I know for a fact I could get off this right now. I could download 27 different versions of Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers off the old NES. I can download it on my computer. I download it on my phone. I probably download it on, wherever and play it. But it still won't be the same as if I went over to Nick's and played it on his NES
Yeah,
or
you're
something
not
like that.
blowing into that
It would
cartridge to
not
make
feel
it
the
work.
same.
I mean, it's silly, but that was a part of it. That was a part of the nostalgia. That was your youth going, oh crap, didn't load. You pop it back in. Um, you don't get that with digital. That was growing up. No having before the save cartridge, came out. Or you would lose a save cartridge and then you're boned, but that was a part of life. That was part of the game. I played Ghostbusters on the original Nintendo for God knows how many hours straight, just because I couldn't get the save to work on it for some reason. And I decided after God knows how many hours to take a nap. I wake up, my mom unplugged it so she could vacuum. Oh my God, she about aborted me that day. I was so mad at her. But you don't get that. Go ahead.
So I didn't mean. No, I was going to get you off track here, but I don't want you to finish your story because I've got a question for everybody. So this is the question. If you could have, and we're not talking about the Holy Grail on eBay or anything like that. For you personally, like you guys both know, and Pat would know too, like if somebody could give me a rig that had Star Wars Galaxies with Jump to Light Speed on it and the Kashyyyk expansion, the all that in it, and they could give it to me and I could play it. I don't care if there's 1,000 people on it. I would absolutely love to have 15 buddies or people to play with that we could go and run stuff with. That would be great. But like that would be my not holy grail, but that would be the one. So what about you guys? Like what system, what game? I mean, I just like to know what you guys would want.
I couldn't say a system because every iteration has basically had something I have been passionate for, just love. But far as a game, oh my God, I could probably nail one off each console, but I don't think I could pick one in total. Original Nintendo, the original Duck Hunt, PlayStation 1, Siphon Filter, or Dino Crisis. God, there's just so many that I would love to have in my possession. The Battle Arena Toshinden, Nick, when we saw it over there at Game World, man, so many flashbacks of that game. It wasn't the best game, but it launched with the PlayStation. And, I remember the music, the melodies, the sound effects of the attacks. So, man, I don't know if I could truly just walk through and nail it. Every console had something just wonderful on it. Even the PS3 to me was the weakest console out of every console I ever played. But Metal Gear Solid 4 on there was amazing. I mean, I still own it. So every console is going to be, give me every console, and then I can pick at least one game for each console that I would die to have. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, every console with every game would be definitely, but if that's not the scenario, I think it's like a one, or just kind of narrowing it down. I would like to have, because I have a lot of the different consoles and stuff, but one of them that I would really love to have is the Sega Saturn with every Sega Saturn game. That's what I want. So, and mainly because the Sega Saturn, I love the Sega Saturn. It's not. I don't think it was a great. It was a huge everyone loved it type of console, but I love the Sega Saturn. And it's an expensive console still to this day, and all the games are expensive. So I would love to play like the original Resident Evil that was put on the Sega Saturn. I'm sure it's probably the same as every other version of Resident Evil, but I don't know. I just would love to play the Sega Saturn version, and some of the other Sega Saturn games that came out, because that was kind of a console that had a short lifespan, and I would love to have seen. I would love to have it and own it and own a lot of and pretty much every game for it. So that would be mine, Sega Saturn.
Yeah, I mean, do you consider yourself a Sega master, or did you just like everything?
I liked everything. The portion of Sega that I didn't really care for was, and they had a few good games on them, but the Sega CD and the 32X were, I feel like, were kind of Sega's lower points, right? The Sega CD has some good games, 32X has some good games, but the Sega Genesis is really where it was at. Those extra add-ons really didn't give it much more than just some crappy spin-offs, some gimmicks. But then, Sega Saturn, I thought, was a great console. It just kind of came out, they did bad by it. That's why it didn't kind of make, it didn't do as well. We've talked about this before. They released it, supposedly, from what we've heard and from what it's been written down, is it was announced at an E3 where they talked about it, and they released it on that same day, and retailers and various things like that didn't know they were going to release it that day. So it was a kind of a scramble for them to get it out on the shelves and various things like that. And that I think that hampered its sell, because they didn't hype up the release date for it, and get the retailers ready to be able to advertise for it and various things like that. So they Sega, I mean, to this day, one of my favorite Sega consoles is the Dreamcast. I mean, it's like one of my top, if I were to pick top 3, it would definitely be in the top 3 as my favorite console of all time. Unfortunately, I don't think Sega will ever make another console again, but I would love to see a Dreamcast too, if I could. But that's just like the heyday. They probably wouldn't have the support like they did back in the day. So unfortunately,
absolutely. I mean, yeah, 3DO, that like the first console. I actually kind of I went from Genesis to 3DO. So like the very first time I touched a 3DO was amazing. So it is interesting. I love the fact that that I think game preservation is much more prevalent now than it was 10 years ago. Like, people didn't really care 10 years ago, but now that collector versus preservation is kind of coming out there, I think that we'll have some more options. I know new consoles are coming out, and some of the major players are not necessarily doing a lot of revisits or at least releasing legacy games. But I think, in the next 5 years, we're probably going to see, because of COVID concerns, because of manpower. I mean, I think a lot of what we're dealing with right now, why we're not getting updates to games, why we're not getting expansion and beyond expansions, because people are short with the workforce. I think if we had the right workforce and stuff like that, those things would change. But it's definitely an interesting topic.
Yeah, for sure. And we're seeing, like you say, we're seeing more of that kind of game preservation come through, and I think we'll see it more in the future. You see those arcade machines now, the 1UP arcades that are bringing back the old arcade games. And I saw another arcade manufacturer the other day on Facebook that's bringing back like some arcade cabinets and stuff like that. Theirs is a little bit more different. It's like 100 games in one arcade cabinet type thing, but they have that same arcade style that 1UP does. So it's, you're seeing that game preservation come back. And I agree with you. Within time, I think you'll see the, companies, and a lot more companies, kind of come back with those older games and kind of try to follow along with to bringing back those oldies. But it is a good thing, hopefully us as gamers and gamers out there keep that game preservation in mind, and, try to keep with that and keep your stuff, you never know when you want to play it again. So try not to sell it if you can. I know people come on hard times, so they have to sell that stuff, or maybe they're just, they eventually fall out of it. But as long as you have people willing to preserve those titles and preserve those games and keep a collection, or donate that collection to one of the museums, that's a great thing. That's why we keep that game preservation alive, so that in the future everyone can look at those games and play them and experience those things that were in the past. It's a great thing for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's about a perfect way to kind of finish that out, and kind of just give it a complete picture of what we as gamers, we as consumers need to do. That's for sure. That's about as perfect. Shane, do you have anything to add left for game preservation?
My wife needs to let me buy more games. About it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think we've got this one, pretty much covered. Everybody out there, we really appreciate you coming in and listening. If you've got some old titles, if you've got some old games that you enjoyed, put them in our comments, talk about them. I'm telling you right now, Nick will respond. He will absolutely respond to you, especially if you talk about some old games. And Shane will probably too. So again, thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. And we'll see you on the next cast.
See ya.